and we see President Joe Biden and the photo of the former President Donald Trump also on the front page. Mahama versus Nana, 5 key issues to judge. And later on the 2020 election petition right here on TV3, we'll go into that. U.S. civil rights activist louts Nana's COVID fight. Now, Daily Graphic also says baby harvesting syndicates busted. They include 2 doctors and 4 nurses. And we have the Yoko boss, Mr. Frank Edu-Poku's photo on there. So please don't mistake it. That's the Yoko boss. That's not one of the doctors who was picked up. Election petition, Supreme Court outlines roadmap for trial. And we see that Chief Justice Kwesi Anini-Yeboah, who's photoed in there as well. Local trial of COVID-19 vaccine critical, Professor Dodu. And COVID-19 fund mobilizes over 57 million Ghana cedis. This was disclosed by the Chief of Staff, Firma. Of course, yesterday she was also speaking at the reopening of schools events that took place at the University of Ghana. And also now to the Ghanaian Times, most authoritative paper. It says Joe Biden sworn in as 46th president of the USA. The police also cracked syndicate. 2 doctors, 4 nurses, 5 others grabbed. President appoints Jubilee House staff, retains Frema Osei Opare as chief of staff, and Nana Bedeto, Eugene Ahin, and others. You find that on page 17 if you want more details. Ongoing 2020 election petition, lawyer Chachichi Kata urges Supreme Court not to sacrifice justice for expedition. And now to the business finder. Boom for fruits, vegetables growers as demand from UK increases. Banks won't regret providing us support. Potato farmers cry out. COVID-19, 5 MMDAs equipped to build back better. And then to the Business and Financial Times. FWSC wants deeper discussions to stem growing splinter labor unions, and enforced protocols focus on revenue generation. That's from Professor Quarty. Not further borrowing to burden the debt stock, and shipping line rates must change. And finally, to the Crusading Guide, it says Mahama stages comeback after Supreme Court ruling, and Songo Salt Project Buhaha, Libet Warner misleads public with lies. Nungwa Manche grows wild over encroaches of Santeo lands as the stool wins judgment, and Gold Digger declared wanted over $210,000. Let me quickly just go back to the screen and replay that video that we played just a few minutes ago. For those of you who just tuned in, let me quickly introduce my guest. So Mr. Kofi Asare is the Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch, and he sent that video to Johnny earlier. We got to play it. Let's quickly take a look at it again. Good morning, Mr. Kofi Asare, by the way.
Good morning, Bella.
All right, so let's go back to this video quickly, and then after that, we can continue. So this is a school, Mr. Kofi Asare, in Akachi North District. And it shows students who unfortunately do not have classrooms to study. They are under the trees, that's their blackboard. And unfortunately, the main issue here also is that they are not able to socially distance because of the nature of their desks. And so you see 2 students per desk, and they are all crammed together in that space. And so this is where the concern is. Some of these students are not wearing their nose masks. And the question is, did they even have a classroom, first of all, before studying under the trees? Let's go quickly take a look at some of the photos that were sent by Mr. Kofi Asare to indicate how their classroom looked like earlier. So this is the state of their classroom, and I hope you can see it clearly. This is the state of their classroom at the moment. It collapsed. And even before it collapsed, it didn't look any different. And that's why they had to resort to studying under the trees. And the question also is, where are the PPEs? Because yesterday, in interacting with our correspondents in the various regions, they mentioned that even though some of the PPEs have arrived in some of these schools, most of them do not have nose masks. So they have tissue, they have hand sanitizers, they have liquid soap, but they do not have nose masks. Let's quickly take a look at a school in the Ga East area as well. And difficulty, of course, with social distancing was the main problem there. Take a look.
The coronavirus pandemic led to the closure of schools. After over 10 months, schools are back in full swing. However, classroom congestion is a challenge. Many classes would have to be divided. At the Kwabena Atomic MA1 and 2 primary in Accra, classrooms are uncomfortable. The World Health Organization recommends smaller class sizes to reduce the spread of a virus. But at the Kwabena Atomic MA Basic School, this is not the situation. pupils are crammed in one class, the fear of the spread of the virus is real.
Parents are eager to bring their children to school, but we are constrained with space. So what we are going to do now is to split most of the classes that are over and above the size of the classroom, so that we'll be able to observe social distancing. Temporarily, we can create space in the form of canopies and pavilions, so that some of the children can be taken outside of the classroom.
Municipal authorities, however, say the situation must be changed.
If we divide them into two, using the shift system, we'll be able to manage the situation. My officers and the directorate is also writing to some churches around here to request for the use of the space that they have. In the meantime, whilst we begin the plans for expansion, because it cannot happen just in a day or two, we are making moves to space them up. That is very, very key in the fight against this disease.
And that's a report by Komla Adom. Mr. Kofi Asare is the Executive Director for Africa Education Watch. Good morning one more time.
Morning, Bella.
And this is not the only school that is struggling with social distancing. Over the period since schools have been opened from Monday up until now, we've seen a number of classrooms crammed with students. And the question is, we've had 10 months or so of which most schools were closed, apart from the the two levels that were allowed to go back to school and write their exams. Of course, we had that pilot reopening, so we understood what the challenges clearly were. 10 months down the line, we're back here, and we still do not have a plan as to how to socially distance these students. This is a head teacher saying that they don't have a choice than to put up canopies to have some of these students sit there just so they can avoid the crowding in the classrooms. Kofi Asare, what do you say about some of these issues that have come as a result of the reopening of schools?
I think the issue of physical distancing is one big challenge. We all know that the issue with COVID is about having a fixed asset, which is the infrastructure, and having to manage it consistent with the protocols that should enable us to live with COVID peacefully. And so physical distancing is key, in the COVID fight. Now, the challenge is that even before COVID, our schools were overcrowded. Before COVID, the average class size in an Accra school was about 70 before COVID. Okay? And so the challenge was always going to be how we manage the splitting of school classes in urban and peri-urban schools. Because the situation is a bit different in rural schools, especially those in the communities, not the district capitals. We would have expected that with the GES having data on class sizes in every school in Ghana, this issue could have been averted by simply planning. In a district, averagely we have about 100 schools, maybe about 90. Now, how difficult is it for the regional director of education to host all district directors, bring the data of your class sizes, and then let's do the splitting. Let's see the classes that we're going to split and those that we are not going to split. This is so simple. This could have been done in just one meeting between district directors and the regional directors.
Are you saying that not a single meeting was held between the district directors and the regional directors ahead of the reopening of schools?
Not to discuss splitting of class, and then not to actually undertake the splitting of classes. So the classes to be splitted should have been known before school reopened. In other countries, like Sierra Leone, before the day school reopened, education directors had met and discussed the splitting of schools. So before they appeared in school day one, they have an idea about the number, the schools that are going to be splitted and those that ain't going to be splitted. They had an idea. They knew the schools that will be running shifts and those that will be maintaining their numbers because they have smaller class sizes. And they also had an idea about if the school environment community was going to be split into two, which infrastructure within the community would be available for us to improvise. That is so simple to do because we have the data. We have the data. The Education Ministry has the data. GNS has the data. So you know that after these meetings have taken place before the reopening, the district directors will now meet the school heads and give them information that we are trying to split your school into two because of this A, B, C, D, E. Then the school heads will go to the communities and get the community leaders about the possible options for citing the improvised school because education in COVID is improvising. We are not going to have the normal school we have. We are managing. So that facilitation would have been done by the head and the community because the head is part of the SMCPTA. By the time school reopens on day one, we know that Chufagona Primary, we are splitting these 3 classes into 2. And so half will go and have their classes in the Presbyterian Church. Another half will go and have their classes in the Methodist Church. These things are done before the reopening date. The business of asking teachers to come to school on the day that school is reopening is a bit my mind. You understand? Because the planning of the splitting of classes should have been done with the data that the GNS has ahead of the reopening of schools. So that is why we are struggling with physical distancing.
But a 10-member committee was set up all the way back in what? Was it August
I think
or
in
September?
Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've had all that time to also plan, and which is why the committee was set up anyway by the then education minister. Up until now, we're still struggling with how to, allow students to physically distance in these classrooms. And we've left the burden on these teachers who now have to decide, what to do in these classrooms. In cases where all classrooms are filled up and they don't have any extra space on the compound, or it's an enclosed area where there are no other buildings on the side where students can occupy these buildings, what do we do?
Yes, there are some gaps, but it's difficult because we have still not been given copies of the reopening committee's report. We do not know what they recommended to government. We do not know what government's position on their recommendations were. All we know is that GS issued guidelines for reopening of schools, and the guidelines were issued on Friday, the weekend before the reopening on Monday. That's all we know. So no one has been given a copy of that school reopening committee.
So what are we working with then? The guidelines only, if we're not privy to the information from the committee? Exactly.
So we are working with the guidelines. And these guidelines foresaw the possibility of splitting of classes. But it did not give concrete guidelines on how classes should be split. It just said on page 3 that if a head teacher realizes that their class is unbearably high, those are the words they use, unbearably high, they should contact the district director. That is a discretionary power. You don't give discretions in guidelines, not discretions that impugn on a protocol, the most important protocol so far as we are concerned, apart from the wearing of the nose mask. So you don't give discretions that way. In the previous guideline, which was used last year, which we used to reopen junior high schools, for which we were all happy about the outcome, it was explicitly stated in the same section on splitting of classes that the maximum class size is 30. So the reason why the GNS removed that, remains. There is a reason.
Which is?
Of course, it's latent because I think that the GNS was trying to run away from 2 things. One, the burden of having to accede to the fact that we are going to split classes and it will come with extra resources because teachers are going to be demanding more motivation to work all day. Because you're going to be working from 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So that was an attempt to avert that explicitly. And then also, the second is that there was an admission that a lot of work has not been done. So that's the only way you can cover up. Because if you had done a lot of work, as I said, if the regional directors had met all the district directors with their school enrollment data, and they had done the class splitting meetings prior to the guidelines, the GES would have had no excuse or no reason not to have disclosed the maximum class size as prescribed by the genius. But because that hadn't been done, the only way to cover up for that inefficiency would have been to put that discretion there, that if you have an unbearably high class size, contact your district director.
But if you contact them, then what are we expecting them to do?
If you contact the district director, then what should have been done 2 weeks before reopening will now be done. So as we speak now, some schools in the Kaswa area, for instance, are now going through the process of engaging their district directories and then planning for the splitting of schools. So some schools are now looking for churches where they can have, let's say, Monday, Tuesday lessons there because the churches might use them on Wednesday or Friday. So we are now beginning to do how we should have done 2 weeks prior to reopening. But let me indicate that there are some communities that are also doing their best to improvise. Feyase, for instance, is a community in the Bosomtwe district. The assemblyman and then the headmistress have been able to mobilize the community, and they are erecting sheds where they are going to have their classes split into 2 so that they can have a fairly physically distanced class. There are other schools that are doing the same at the community level, especially where the PTA works. But in urban and peri-urban areas, we know that PTAs don't function. Partly because we cancel PTA dues, and in Ghana, once you cancel PTA dues, even the zeal with which the convener will convene a meeting will even vanish, you know. So some schools are doing their best, but they are doing so within the constraint of desks. Because if you look at the pictures that you were showing, and the pictures that we have seen in schools like OEB Presby, you will see that in all these choked classrooms, there are always 3 people sitting on one desk.
Or sometimes even 4. We've seen the extent.
Okay. So it means that should they have an extra space, they will still not have the desks. If you look at my open air school in Akachi South, Akachi North, I think the school's name is Nodo Okope.
Okay.
Nodo Okope DA Basic. Even though the whole school is under a tree, I mean all the classrooms are under trees, realize that even if they had infrastructure, they are still doing 3 on a desk. And so apart from the fixed assets being our major challenge, we still have deficits in school desks, which will still constrict our efforts to reasonably physically distance within the WHO, GES, and then Ghana Health Services protocols.
Mr. Kwame Otredako is here. He's a business development consultant. He's also just joined us in the studio. Good morning, Kwame.
Good morning.
Good to have you in the studio. How are you?
Good.
I mean, following up on Kofi's comments and the fact that, again, we've had 10 months, of which probably if we had planned, properly, we should have been able to see into the future and know that these desks will not be convenient for reopening of schools. And so what do we do to ensure that? We've had the district education offices all are, at post, and nothing has been done up until now, to the extent that there are even schools that do not have PPEs. And where PPEs are provided, there are no nose masks. We're hearing of tissue, we're hearing of, hand sanitizer and everything else, but not PPEs. Social distancing is a problem, and if a student does not have a mask and you're expecting 3 students per desk, and all 3 do not have a mask, what are we doing to these children?
Sorry for that. It's funny. I remember that somewhere around August to July last year, I mean, just around when they said the final year students of JHS should go back to school, I wrote a little piece that I called Grades for Graves. So number one, I want to look at it from, if you're not ready, who is pushing you? Okay, that is one. And then I picked up a few things from the expert's presentation, that even when we decide to split the kids, there are certain places where the design of the desk will not even allow us to split the children the way we're supposed to. I intentionally went to my kids' school yesterday to go and see exactly what is happening there. Now, how do you get 5-year-olds And if you want 6-year-olds to conform to the rules of the school or in the classroom strictly, what I found out was that the teachers were overwhelmed. And you could see that they were tired. Because these are kids that when you give them 5 minutes break, and especially since they haven't seen each other for so long, this one wants to go and hit this one wants to go and touch this one wants to, you know, they're back to life. Their life is school. And for that matter, the teachers have been running helter-skelter, trying to maintain what they've been asked to do. But obviously, they won't be able to do much from the way I see it. I go to, again, what the experts said. The Deputy Minister of Education of this country is somebody I admire so much, somebody I have been watching for a while, and is somebody that I believe that knows his job. In fact, I think he's the new minister now.
Designate, yeah.
So the only problem I can see with the committee that was set a couple of months ago that have not gone through all these things that they were supposed to go through is probably politics. Just around the time that committee was set, it was a heavy-duty active area time for politics then. So people were running around trying to be MPs and whatnot. In fact, including the current Minister of Education. I think he won a seat somewhere in Bekwai, or I don't remember where.
I think it's
Bosomtrin.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, my brother. So that's the only reason why it's the only reason I can think of why we have a committee since September or October, and we haven't even been able to touch base with the ground, which churches we're going to split the kids in, what we're going to do with this 3 joint table desk that will not allow us to split the kids. There's so many things that tells us that the committee has not really done what they're supposed to do. Now, my issue with this whole school reopening thing is whether we are ready, because there's another aspect of it which is not just the children. I am being asked that my kids have to be picked. First they said 12 o'clock. Then now it moved to 1 o'clock. And you see, that timing to pick kids from school is not the usual timing. So I have seen so many arguments and debates going on in parent platforms where people are saying that no, number one, we cannot pick them at the time you say we should pick them. Number two, if you are deciding to say pickup time is this time, then it means that from that time to the time I pick the kid, if I'm able to get there at 3, the kid might not be supervised. Okay, then there's another school of thought that says that, especially with the private schools, who in a way are trying to conform with the directives that the ministry is given. If I am picking my kids at 12 o'clock or 12:30, of which before COVID I was picking them at 3, how does that translate into figures? Okay, because this time around, yes, I understand the extra cost of school management because of the pandemic. So I put that on the side. But then fees, typical fees, not to do with COVID, have also gone up. And I am picking them earlier than the time I picked them. So how do we explain that? So there's a whole lot of different debates that are going on right now. I would say that if we are not ready, we should not push it. Maybe we need time for orientation of all the teachers, all education staff, district directors and everything, put up a proper plan, and then we open up. Because in this game, when you lose the kid, there's no line coming back.
Or else we could have also thought about opening some levels and not all levels, because that's where we could have used the extra classrooms
to manage,
to enable physical distancing.
Yes.
And so that's the question, that was it really necessary for us to allow all the kids on all levels to have gone back to school almost at the same time?
Because there are countries where they only reopened upper primary, and then they have still staggered the reopening of kindergartens and then primary 1 to primary 3. Apart from the fact that it's difficult to control kids, at that age, it frees up space for the upper primary and upwards to observe reasonable physical distancing and avoid the spread of the disease. But then, you see, everyone seems to support the idea that schools should have reopened, except that the approach, is where a lot of people, differ in opinion. But as we discuss the issues of reopening within COVID, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that before COVID, these situations were pertaining, except that COVID has helped to expose the inequities in the system. When you talk about the inequity in the system, people call you populist, But we are now, facing the stark reality of how the system we've built to allocate resources to education is against, especially rural schools. And that's why urban schools are always better, and mainly private schools. We are seeing the difference between the approach in managing teaching by private schools and those of public schools. We are seeing the lack of accountability and the mindset of a public school management entity and how it's totally in abeyance or totally at variance with that of a private school. The lessons are always there, but we haven't demonstrated our readiness to learn and make lessons. And for me, an emerging trend we have observed, which is very worrying, is the denial of access to education as a result of this. Let me give you an example. 2 weeks ago, we sat here when the private school council indicated that about 215 private schools have already closed down. We saw video footages of some of them being converted into hostels and all that. Apart from those that have closed down, there were also schools that have lost their teachers, private schools. Now, we are beginning to feel the heat now. Yesterday, my team visited schools, especially in the Kaswa area, Ninyano AM Zion, for instance. The school is not admitting people at junior high school because authorities are saying the school is full. The people who are clamoring for admissions in public schools now are mainly coming from the collapsed private schools. Because if your private school collapses today, it is difficult to get another private school due to the congestion issues. No private school would like to take people beyond their capacity because they will struggle with congestion and parents will complain and end up withdrawing their kids. So the only way that students in these 215 plus schools and students in private schools that have no teachers to date can find an education is to go to public schools. And we have received a lot of calls from Adreganon, from all over the place. People are looking for schools, but when you go to the school, they say the public school is full. And indeed, public schools are full because we are seeing the numbers that are sharing a desk. And you ask that if a class size of a public school within COVID is 80, obviously there cannot be any admission. Especially where the school, the head teacher has no idea presently where to even split the existing 80 class and then operate the other one from. Much more add to the numbers and exacerbate the situation. So not only are the teachers in some private schools overwhelmed by the task of ensuring compliance to protocols, but same managers in public schools are overwhelmed on how to not only manage the existing numbers, but admit students who are seeking admissions.
What happens to these students then? Because maybe someone will suggest that this is where virtual learning comes in, and we could have found a way to still get these children educated, even if they are not physically in the classrooms. But again, the disparities between the rural areas and even some areas here in the city and, the international schools, because a lot of these international schools are running virtual classes, at least for a month or more before they decide to allow the students to go back to school.
But these are mainly peri-urban schools.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we cannot implement this in the public schools all across the country because of network challenges, because of a number of issues that were faced in the past with virtual learning.
Because of infrastructural deficit. You know, when other countries were pushing so hard to make sure that certain infrastructures are in place, we had played a lot of politics with ours. I mean, coming to tell stories of how we are extending internet access to here and there within this time and all that. For me, one of the biggest solutions of this COVID problem we have would be infrastructure, and especially access to internet. Okay, because then that same public teacher could have taught, if you want, history in one whole village, irrespective of which school the kid attends. But we are not infrastructure ready. And if you take Rwanda, for instance, when they were beaming out their access to internet, I mean, people thought that they were overdoing it a bit, because there are certain places where the people don't even have the knowledge of how to use it. No, but that is being infrastructure ready, because internet has become, if you want, like Ghana water. There must be water everywhere, and there must be internet everywhere, because everything else that comes in that will move us forward, they plug into these infrastructures, whether you want it or not. Okay, so I want to come to the private school teachers. I have a number of friends who own private schools, and they have shared a lot of stories with me. I mean, all the way from last year, and how they had to find money to pay their teachers. Some were doing half payment because school was not going on. But you can do it to a certain level, and you cannot afford to continue. So for a friend of mine who runs, I think her school is called Bloom and Blossom or something like that, she paid salary 6 months after we shut the schools down, and she ran out of money. So her teachers started finding other jobs to do. And one thing that I've also come to realize is that in the heat of the schools going home, in the heat of the teachers not being paid, quite a number of them have found other trades.
Yeah.
Okay? Somebody has realized that, oh, if I can bring some clothing from Togo to sell, it will not be a bad idea till school reopens. Then she finds out that she earns more from that than the teaching, so she's not going back. You understand? So the conditions, if you want, has pushed some of the good teachers into different trades, and they're probably enjoying that more, and for that matter might never come back. So the private schools, we're going to have a lot of them struggling and a lot of them closing down even after schools have reopened, because it's not all of them can go through the first quarter or the first phase of the reopening of the schools. And there will be teachers, I can envisage that there will be teachers moving around a lot. The relevancy of teachers within schools will be very high, because as we speak now, if 2 teachers from my school have left and you're not paying me, or where I am, they're not paying me what they're supposed to pay me, there's so many avenues out there, people looking for teachers. So you see teachers moving from one school to the other, looking for better packages and stuff like that. And that's not very good for our children. As much as teachers connect with their students, students also connect with their teachers. And when there are frequent breaks and changes as to who is teaching, and it messes the whole thing up.
Kofi, I mean, taking a look at even the school in Akachino, the video that we watched, let's just say that they might have to rely on virtual learning. Looking at the situation in which their classrooms are, clearly internet connectivity and a few other things is also going to be a challenge. How are we going to ensure that students in this district and in other districts such as this would also benefit from virtual learning as against students in the peri-urban schools? if we should decide moving forward? Because the president has said that if we don't take care, he will be forced to go on another lockdown. Are we ready even for such a situation? And what happens to the students?
In the short term, there's nothing we can do. In the medium term, government will have to invest in EdTech, education technology products that provide interactive learning content.
Are we now going to do that?
That works offline. I am aware that there's a World Bank support to the government of Ghana to digitize teaching and learning. Among others, it includes provision of gadgets to learners and then training of teachers in how to use virtual learning systems and technologies to instruct and also to assess. It involves, among others, the creation of a learning bank and all that. I don't know the extent to which that program has progressed. But in the short term, I don't see any solution in the short term to technologies that provide offline interactive, learning content to students in areas without electricity and internet. It's a challenge that we have to manage. For me, I have always indicated that I always prefer an in-person teaching under a tree in a community without an internet than for such people to be watching TV, which is not interactive, and pretending that we are having any instructional activity at all, because the new curriculum that is being used is supposed to be one that must travel on a pedagogy which is more engaging. It is a learner-based so that curriculum is implemented well when you adapt learner-based pedagogies. It is not the normal teacher-centered one where you talk. No, this is a more activity and learner-based one. And so for us to have some level of efficiency, you need to have some interface. And that is why I agree that we have made a lot of mistakes in the past. We kept raising the flags that, look, we are concentrating everything on free senior high school. In the past 4 years, we built less than 300 basic schools, and we built over 1,000 structures in senior high schools. The focus was on senior high schools, obviously because we wanted to end the double track. But maybe the balance should have been there, because the level of deprivation that basic has suffered. It is not only infrastructure. We mentioned in the last 2 years that we did not understand why a policy like free school uniform and free exercise books was cancelled in basic schools and taken to senior high schools. It didn't make sense. So there are a lot of decisions that we took that squarely did not situate within the reasoning of education policy, taking into cognizance our situation as a country, where the rural-urban divide is key in education quality. Why deny a rural child access to free uniform and exercise book, and then rather carry that particular facility to senior high schools, And so we have made a lot of mistakes in the past, mistakes in terms of misprioritization of education spending. On the infrastructure bit, the debate cannot be complete without us acceding to the fact that if we don't change the system within which we administer education infrastructure in this country, we will just talk and go away and come and talk again next year. Now, this is the issue. The issue is this, that if you read the World Bank's AICD report, AICD report of the World Bank more or less sought to compare the cost of infrastructure, how much countries spend on infrastructure across the continent. Ghana's infrastructure cost is one of the highest. Now, 5 years ago, when Excellency Dr. Bawumia was campaigning to be vice president, he indicated that the cost of hospital projects were overbloated by more than 100%. And that was one of the most sensible things that I was happy to have heard from a politician during. I was very happy because I knew that yes, they were highly, bloated.
He cited Ridge Hospital.
And he cited a lot of examples. He did engagement with stakeholders, media, and made presentations and promised that when they come, they were going to have the cost of school buildings, everything. Okay? What happened was that when the MPP won the election, the opposite rather happened. The cost of school infrastructure increased from 350 to 450,000, the same 6-unit classroom block. The systemic change that we were clamoring for did not happen. We need a systemic change in the way we procure infrastructure, and if you like, to take a second look at the component of our infrastructure. It is too expensive to use this kind of buildings If assuming the costing is right, it is too expensive. There are various technologies that have been used in other countries which are cheaper. Because you should be able to build a 6-unit classroom block with 250,000 Ghana cedis. Even today, if you are building a 6-unit classroom block, you can build it to 300,000. NGOs like ActionAid and World Vision and a lot of organizations are doing 6-unit classroom block with 300,000 cedis. Even for most of them, they even use tiles on the floor. Why is the government one costing almost twice? Why are the coastal development authorities building 3-unit junior high school blocks for almost 500,000 Ghana cedis? You understand? And so the system within which we administer our limited resources to provide educational infrastructure is not efficient. There is no value for money in it. If we do our systemic overhaul properly, out of every one school we build, we should have 2. Anytime you build a school 6-unit classroom block for 40,000, 500,000 Ghana cedis, and we complain, and you don't understand how we complain, the opportunity cost is the situation in Akachinov we just saw. That is the opportunity cost. You deny another community access to infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that's the system must change. If we don't change the system, we will be pouring a lot of water in an empty basket.
Let's read some comments quickly and then we'll carry on with the rest of the conversation before we wrap up. And we want to hear from you as well, so please do send us your WhatsApp messages or on social media. The hashtag is TV3New I'll start off with Abbas Amogobo from Ofinsu. He says, every indication emanating from the president's address points a clear picture that our kids and the teachers are certainly in great danger. Why open schools when there are no PPEs? Good morning, my cherished TV station, my cherished fearless presenters of our time. Johnny, we live in a country where a portion of the people call themselves superhumans, and they refer to we, the larger population, as the ordinary Ghanaian. And so the only thing they think about is themselves. Johnny, the issue of supplying of PPEs and fumigation of schools before resuming is just a way of throwing dust into our eyes. My school has not been fumigated, neither PPE supplies, and the most dangerous thing is that, as of yesterday, dual desks, which must be occupied by one student because of the pandemic, are being shared by 3 students because the rest would have nowhere to sit. Johnny, I heard you talk about social distancing. My brother, where is that social distancing going to be practiced? Is it in the classroom with 15 desks and 39 students? May God have mercy on the ordinary Ghanaians. And to our politicians, well, God is watching. The hypocrisy in this country of ours is too alarming on the part of our politicians. Hashtag God is watching. And that's from, okay, he says, stay blessed and stay safe. Good morning. I'm Osikeni Techi from Taifa, Burkina. I think the problem here in Ghana is that we lack honesty and outspoken people. If we had that, we wouldn't be encountering all these setbacks. The shift system will be the best option for most public schools since physical distancing is a major problem in most classrooms. GS, in a matter of urgency, considers the shift system to avert the spread of COVID-19 in most schools. From Taguchi Ventures, Latibio Koshi. Good morning, Johnny, your colleague in the studio. You are the kind of people I love listening to. What you are showing to us this morning is just a tip of the iceberg. I don't know why they should be in a rush. I was expecting them to spend at least a week or 2 to make sure the PPEs are ready before the schools are reopened. What the authority portrays on the TV and radio stations to the whole world is not what we're experiencing on the ground. So who are we deceiving? We only give God the glory for the protection He provides His children. Keep telling the truth. That's Felix from Upper East Region. I thank you, Honorable Johnny Hughes, for the good work he's doing on TV3 show. He should keep it up. Napoleon Bonaparte in Tumu. Let your team visit Apramdo Catholic Primary in the Ifia Kwesimintim municipality, and you will see worse things, please. Good morning. Government would have to be blamed should anything happen to our children in school, because I always ask myself, who pushes government into doing things that they are not ready for? Couldn't all the PPEs have reached the schools before reopening? The same mistakes were made during the free SHS election activities, which has put us into trouble. Now, etc. Wilson from Akoma in the Volta region. Good morning, Bella. Reopening of schools as COVID-19 cases hike are very conflicting and disturbing. Kids are unpredictable. You give them blue masks to school and they bring the red mask home. Nothing like contact tracing again. No aggressive testing. Frontline health workers had only 2 months of the promised 50%. God have mercy. Sugar Coffee from Ejusa. Good morning, TV3. Those struggling in our schools, or these struggles in our schools, are happening because our leaders are insensitive and lack proactive thinking and good reasoning. They always wait till the situation happens before they begin to think. Even up till now, Ghana doesn't have a national development plan. Who are we? Love your outfit. Thank you so much, Koku Menu from Kapong. Good morning, TV3 Ghana. What I saw is a huge joke. Should we really be opening schools? This message is coming from Akimoda, and it's from Amediku Nam. Now, yesterday, an interview was granted by the Director of Health of the Ghana Education Service, and I quickly just want to read it out. He says, and that's Dr. Boaji Da Costa. He says that over 10 million PPEs have been produced and distributed well in advance of school reopening. He says they were distributed to the regional education offices, and he says all the regional health and education offices received the PPEs and other materials as of Friday, the 15th of January 2020. My understanding is that the district offices must pick up the items and distribute them to schools. Some schools have received their items, but not all. We also have the indication that the district offices had asked the head teachers to visit those offices and pick up the PPEs for their various schools. And we all raised concerns as to who is going to fund transport, especially for these schools that have run down completely. Now, we have the Director of Health saying that it's actually the opposite. The district offices are the ones who are supposed to be distributing the PPEs to the various schools. If as at Friday, the 15th of January, we had already distributed PPEs, it's been 4 days into the reopening of schools. We still have a number of schools across the country that have not received their PPEs. For those who have, they don't even have nose masks for the students. We're told the nose masks are still on their way to the schools. What do you say to this? I'll start off with you, Kwame.
Bella, you see, these things will happen because nobody will be punished for these things. If it is true that 10 million PPEs have been distributed to districts to onwardly be distributed to schools and everything, and till today, schools don't have it, who has actually broken the chain of distribution? And who is in charge of making sure that these things get to the schools they have to get to? And if they don't get there, what happens? How do we remedy the situation? But the typical Ghanaian workflow will have so many protective rings around this. If you set out to go and find out why the schools don't have the PPEs, and who is causing the problem, and how do we get to punish this person so it doesn't happen again, you will have to meet 1,000,001 protective rings. Okay? So it's a sieve that when the things happens, we don't care. Number one, it's normal. It's not there, so what? Because it won't end anywhere. Eventually, when it comes in, we will take it. If it's not there, let's work without it. But in other countries or in other jurisdictions, this will not happen because heads will roll. The same man that is talking about 10 million PPEs being out there probably must have gone a bit further to check whether they've gone to where they're supposed to go to or they're still stuck in district offices. So again, it's our attitude towards doing stuff. And that is what has been exhibited in this thing we're doing.
Kofi, should heads roll because we're expecting these PPEs? Now, a number of these students are going to school without their nose mask. And when you ask them, they say their parents said governments will provide. And so they should go to the schools and pick up these PPEs or these nose masks. They get to the school and there are nose masks available for them. And so you see a number of these students all over the place without nose masks. Yesterday in the northern region, one of the schools that our correspondent visited, it was only one student out of a number of students who had a nose mask. All of them were expecting the schools to provide, and yet the school authorities said they had not been provided with PPEs.
Yeah, it is difficult for heads to rule within our public system because we know the cause of the delay in PPEs. As I mentioned, the PPEs are procured under the Senior Minister's office. And so the delay in the PPE starts from the office of the Senior Minister. That is the procurement entity. It is not a GNS matter. GNS only comes in when it receives them in their district education office. So you see, immediately you look at those involved in the value chain and you do an analysis of the causes of the delay. There's no way any head will rule.
The bus will go and stop on the Senior Minister.
No head will rule. The GNS can only give what they have received. They were only going around, covering up, giving excuses. But the fact is that they are not in control of the procurement of PPEs. So the GES came out and explained on Tuesday that by end of the week, schools will receive their PPEs.
But you see,
So, what else can we do? We can only wait.
Why is it that it's the senior minister's office that is procuring PPEs for schools? If you had said that as Ministry of Health doing the procurement for Ministry of Education, because it's got to do, they are experts in that area, and they will be able to tell whether this is good or this is bad or this will last or this will not last. Why are we procuring PPEs through the senior minister's office? Why?
We raised the issue. We advise government that if we want to see something different from what happened in the piloted reopening, we need to decentralize the purchasing of PPEs, because there's no district capital where you can't find liquid soap and sanitizers to buy. Indeed, I have mentioned severally that the GES District Education Office manages at least 1,000 teachers and at least 100 schools. Okay? In the absence of any capacity at all, should the GES District Education Office lack the capacity to procure, at least it should have the capacity to procure common liquid soap and hand sanitizers. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
So we are discussing an issue that has a solution, but we just won't listen to the solution because of the interests that come with the status quo. Centralizing procurement is a big issue in public sector governance in Ghana. And even within the GES themselves, you know, for example, GES, the cars that they drive, they are bought in Accra and sent to them. Even chalk. You understand? So the centralization of procurement and how it affects quality service delivery in Ghana is an issue well documented. We just don't want to change. So we talk about it and then you get tired.
You know, this thing is pure absurdity. I mean, if you talk about procurement of cars, yes, I will agree if GS is buying bulk numbers of cars to distribute with people, because that will seriously affect pricing and stuff like that in terms of purchasing vehicles and stuff. But you see, if a district is running about 1,000 teachers and about 100 schools, and we are the same people preaching sending governance to the people, decentralization, creating of new regions, and whatnot and whatnot. But then we pick certain projects and we want to do it from the wrong places. Can anybody come and explain why PPEs are procured from Safumafu's office, which is the senior minister's office?
Well, not anymore. It's that,
the ex-senior minister's office. You see, why should this happen? And this is to do with the lives of people. This is not a tea party. You understand? This is not a tea party. This is to do with the lives of teachers. It's to do with the life of our own children. And we sit here today and we cannot decentralize nose masks and PPEs and what do you call it, so everybody can get it at the same time and we can hit the ground running. But we will centralize that. And you see, I know that some of you experts, when you come on TV, it's difficult for you to say what the truth is. But there is no other reason for this to happen than personal gains.
Yeah, it's a procurement issue.
Than personal gains. Why, if it is not that somebody thinks that it's an opportunity for him to make extra money, why would the senior minister's office be the one procuring PPEs for all districts across this country?
All schools.
All schools. Why?
10 million learners.
Okay, why? And then the things will not get there when they're supposed to get there, and the teachers will put their life at risk. We will risk our children going to school, all because somebody wants to make some money off this whole thing that is happening. When are we going to do something for this country?
When are we going to do something for this country? And on that note, we're wrapping up on the newspaper review. In the studios, I've had Kwame Ochre Dako. He's a business development consultant, and Kofi Asari is the executive director of Africa Education Watch. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. And we do hope that by the end of this week, we will have arrived at a solution as to how to better protect our children. You wanted to say something?
I wanted to indicate that on the issue of developing innovative technology for building schools, so that we don't keep spending $500,000 to build just one classroom block. so that we can use what we have efficiently and ensure that schools in the rural areas can have their structures much faster. There is a technology that has been developed by CSIR, the Building and Road Research Institute. It's called the pozzolana cement technology, which reduces the cost of building by about 20%. It is there. They are seeking support from government to commercialize it so that they will be building most of this, providing the technology to build most of these schools so that it can be cheaper. But because of the procurement interest of the politician, they are not giving it attention.
They won't do it.
The Cleaver House technology is another technology which Honorable Atachia brought on board. That technology reduces the cost of building by about half. So they are innovative technology that we can import into our educational system and then build schools for far less so that other schools can get schools much faster. If we continue to expand education infrastructure using this present brick and mortar procurement-laced system, which only makes sense to the procurement entity, it will take us a century to get schools for every community.
For every community.
We need to innovate the technology and also cut down on the cost.
Thank you so much. And still TV3 New Day Sports is coming up next. We still have some more for you, entertainment and other very pertinent issues. Keep watching.